started taking it easy towards the tail end of the weekend. So not or tail I'm sorry, tail end of the week, not weekend. But give me 1 second right here. Uh, let's see. In terms of markets, interesting dynamic for sure. Uh, kind of heavy going into the end of Friday, but that's okay. I ended up taking
Or
quite a
tail.
bit off. Let me just push a button real quick. I ended up taking quite a bit off, but I'm still feeling, you know, I would say going into this week, I still feel the same as last week. Like on the hardware side, that's maybe not, but on the software side, I think it looks pretty interesting. So it doesn't look bad in case anyone thinks it looks bad. There was a number of things going on last week. We had earnings. We had FOMC, right? Rates held sideways. And what else? And then just like, the ongoing topic of like DeepSeek and stuff like that. Market leaders like Nvidia pulling down, maybe some puts on Nvidia. Yes, I said it. That could be the case. Again, it's if you know how, things kind of work in here, you have to kind of switch it on like a flip of a dime, I guess. So right now, Nvidia does look like puts, in my opinion, but it could change, right? It could go the other way, and then in that case, if it goes the other way, then it's contingent for me, right? It'll be calls. But for now, yeah, I mean, one of the leaders, Nvidia, looking pretty bearish. Hardware looking kind of bearish, but it's more like tactical bear. I wouldn't say it's like long-term bear. What else? This DeepSeek stuff, right? It impacted hardware quite a bit, as we all know. We'll look at the charts later today. And but then like, at the same time, I think other investors are realizing like, DeepSeek's actually really good for software. So at least the market's response, again, I'm sharing with you what I think the market thinks. You get what I'm saying? What I think the market thinks, based off of like the flow of the capital that we analyze every week. It's pretty fun. I enjoy it. And that's why I enjoy coming in every Sunday here to chit chat about paint drying. We come in here, we watch paint dry. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, you can make it a lot more fun than just watching paint dry. There's a lot of stuff going on. So let's take a look. But yeah, last week was fantastic. I would say, just from a personal angle perspective, last week was probably one of the best weeks of my life. I would performing weeks of my life, I would say. Um, so yeah, let's get into it. I'm excited. Next week, again, I'm kind of thinking about next week already right now. What's it gonna look like? I mean, I don't feel like anything is bad. Like I don't know, maybe some of you guys might say like, it's kind of bearish, but I can't quite say yet because I'm getting mixed signals, right? So more of that to come. But anyways, good morning, folks. How's everyone doing? Happy New Year, Happy Lunar New Year, year of the snake. So happy Lunar Lunar New Year to you folks. I see people trickling in. But I guess, to warm up, if you guys have any questions or any stocks that you want me to look at or any comments about the markets or anything, let me know. We could dive into that first. If not, I'm going to start analyzing top down, and then we'll get into all the fun stocks. After that sip of coffee, by the way. Okay. All right. Then look like you guys are, probably sipping on your coffee as well. So let's look at the S&P 500. Let's see what we're working with, right? Get a little bit of feel and understand everything. Dora says, good morning. Looks like Nvidia is now a broken stock. Oh, yes. Yes, yes. That's why, again, Nvidia is contingent, right? Like from my eyes, what my eyes can see, monkey do. My eye says, hey, it looks like that looks like a put opportunity. But there are things called fake outs, right? If it fakes you out and goes the other way, then you have to have like, remove the ego and just say, hey, it now wants to go the other way, then I'll go long. So you have to be, man, I like what's a cheesy quote here, like what Bruce Lee would say. Is it Bruce Lee? He's like, you gotta be like water, my friend, right? Like you gotta mold to the situation. And that happens a lot, especially when you define the line in the sand and then like let's say the line in the sand is like resistance or whatever, but then it fakes you out, goes the other way. I'm trying to think of a great example, and it happens very frequently in the markets, but that's something we could address as well, because sometimes it could be tough like that, right? So sometimes, like, let me see if I could draw this out. Let me see. I don't know if I could draw it out. Well, maybe on this one. Let's see. Let's see what we could do. Sometimes, like, you let me switch over to blue. Sometimes you draw, like, obviously that's a resistance line right there, right? And we come out and it basically initial long, and it comes back and we retest at the 50 MA. Right? That's great right there. And then we bounce again. So to me, that still looks pretty good, right? But I mean, this last Friday action, a little concerning. So come next week, resistance is obviously at 610 right here. All right, so ideally we get above 610, markets could continue to move. But I think now for the time being, the range is like probably within that 50 MA and that 610 point. So I think that's where we just kind of go sideways. So it's gonna be like yellow light, green light, maybe, is what I'm thinking so far. But speaking of this line right here, right? Like, let me just erase some of this stuff. Like sometimes we'll run through these scenarios, and I'm learning to deal with it myself too. But sometimes like you identify like, okay, that's the nice confluence line right here. That is one is let's say A. A is the trend line right there, and then B is the 50-day moving average right there, right? Sometimes like what happens is it'll go up and then it'll go down, and then you're like, oh, it failed. So then that's like, all right, it's gonna be puts right there. But then it goes back up, and then you're like, oh, that's to me, it's like, oh, that's a long now. So you see, like it could be pretty confusing for a lot of people. But I think what I've learned is like you gotta be willing to go with what the market wants and not challenge what the market wants. Right? It's about respecting the markets. It's about respecting the players who have way more money than all of us who are moving, trillions of dollars. Well, it's not just one player; it's the collective players moving trillions of dollars every day. Right? There's deals going down on a Sunday too, right? Come on, I mean, someone's buying a cup of coffee. No matter the deal size, that's still a deal if you buy a cup of coffee. It's just a consumer transaction. Now, in some cases on a Sunday, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump is working, right? Doing an executive order deal. So, deals happen left and right. Um, but yeah, that's something that I know this part is hard right here, where it's like, okay, it reclaimed the trend line, reclaimed the 50-day moving average, things point up, and then you're like, okay, go along, and then it goes the other way, and then you're like, oh, then you're like, oh, and I'm wrong, and then you feel kind of bad. But I think you just gotta mold with the markets, right? Something I've learned. But yeah, let's dive into it more. Let's see what else we got. So this is the S&P 500 right here, folks. If you ask me right now, from what my eyes can see, I think things are still okay. Like we sort of got like this. Let's see. Let's work it out here, right? Let's work out what our eyes see. You got a little bit of a left shoulder right here, a little bit of a head right here, and then you got like a right shoulder right there. I know it's not the perfect uh, reverse head and shoulders, right? It's not always going to be perfect, but you can slap like like sort of a trend line right there, right? So to me, it's like it's still healthy. It's just like in the near term right now, we're just going through just one bad Friday. That's kind of how I see it. Let's look at QQQ, right? But it still looks okay to me. We could plug it into the very expensive $8,000 indicator, and I'll show you what the indicator thinks as well, which is the other trader grandmasters, right? That again, I got these golden training wheels that assists my decision making. V says, regardless of what the market does, it's like you always say, we have to be a great at risk management. Yeah, exactly. So like Friday, I didn't like Friday's action, so I was up quite a bit. So I decided to just like, hey, let's just take it off. It's been a good week, right? So I wanted to close my week in a good way. And I'll elaborate as I go as to why this week was one of the best weeks of my life. So very good week, but we gotta keep the momentum going. So it's all about what you do today that will, what's that Charles Schwab quote that if you ever digest some of the investor marketing stuff. It's like Charles Schwab's quote is like own your tomorrow, right? Invest today to own your tomorrow or something like that. I forget. Let me sip on some coffee. Okay, so this is the Nasdaq over here. What do we see right here, folks? I mean, again, it's nothing. I don't see anything too bad, right? But We got a resistance line right here, right? Again, we practice long enough, we will get very comfortable with this stuff. So it just takes time, right? And what else do we know? We're above the 50-day moving average right there, right? So essentially, what the markets are telling me right now in the near term is that we're just again that top resistance line that I drew right there is still being respected. So it's telling me that it's highly probable that we stick within that range right there, right? And that's sort of like at the end of the day, if you kind of draw it out, it's sort of a symmetrical triangle, right? In a way, but it'd be something like that right there. But yeah, it's still healthy. I don't see anything too bearish yet, but when I do, I'll call the flip. Let's pull in some indication over here and see what the pros think. And by the way, the pros think that this one right here is a short, right? This is the ticker symbol right here on the upper left, and they think this one's a short. Isn't that cool? I like that. I also agree. I think it's sort of like sort of like a H setup right here, right? It gapped down on the news, and then now it's just kind of like consolidating. Now hold on. This could be a scenario where we would get tricked, right? You might think like, okay, that's a perfect short, but what happens if the short fails? Pop quiz. If the short fails, it becomes a long, right? I know it's wild, but it that's just how it tends to work sometimes. So let's look at the S&P 500 real quick, plug it in here, and what do the other grandmasters think? Well, it's still long, but it's just slow down. At least that's what they think right here. Let's plug in QQQ, right? What do the grandmasters over here think? Well, it's still pretty much a long, but just weaker, right? So still a weaker signal. But yeah, let me end the live stream, and then we'll